Good evening, patrons. It's approaching the midnight hour. I'm taking a little break from writing part 2 of the season finale, Two Birds, One Knife. Boom, there's the intro. I have a lot more than the intro written. A big sticking point is deciding what stuff to leave in part 2 and what stuff to save for Two Birds, One Knife Aftermath, the Patreon exclusive, which is going to provide more details and set up at least 3 and as many as 5 new story arcs. I'm super excited about both new episodes. As I said, I'm taking a little break to talk about Hanukkah Horror. I've talked with a few of you about this episode. It was very well received. I hope you enjoyed it. And this is one of those dumb YouTube videos. The ending of so-and-so explained. I don't ever like to over-explain things because it makes me feel like I'm talking down to you guys, which I don't want to do. And I think you appreciate that. I'll try to highlight old details that are buried to everybody but me. That's not always successful, though. There are so many episodes. There's so much show. And sometimes I'll do a story or a segment or a line that is really heavy with meaning. But because nobody else knows the entire framework of the show as well as I do, it doesn't land. And I think a lot of these things will land on a re-listen if you start from the beginning. In any event, for the first time in a long time, I wanted to go over the actual story of everything that happened in Hanukkah Horror, just to make sure that all of it came through, because a lot of it is between the lines. All right? Are we ready? And then we're going to cap it off with where it could go in the future. But we're not locked down yet. Itzhak Schechter. We don't know a lot about his background. He was asked about it, but he didn't confirm or deny anything. First, that he was a Krav Maga instructor for Israeli Special Forces. Later on, he unleashes some very rusty Krav Maga that takes out someone's eye. So that seems true. And the second thing was that he was alleged to be a Dybbuk hunter. A Dybbuk is a possessing spirit, a malicious, not demon, they don't have demons, a malicious entity from Jewish mythology, which possesses people and in some stories seems to take on their appearance without necessarily possessing them. In any event, a rabbi showing up on this show, if somebody says he's a Dybbuk hunter, why wouldn't you believe it? It's too fucking cool not to believe, right? Oh, yeah, I work for the Israeli Special Forces. I hunt Dybbuks. It's no big deal. He has all this background, which he thought would help him stop the Gehenna killer from taking down other Jews. And there was no ulterior motive here. It was somebody with a particular set of skills, to quote Liam Neeson, who thought he could help his people. So he comes to this town, which is unnamed, because at this point it doesn't matter what the name of the town is, does it? And he tries and fails to stop this guy. It takes him a while. He reaches out. He talks to his Roman Catholic friend. At this point, he learns about the ghastly ones, the effigy. He learns about the brain slugs, and he is an open-minded man listening to his friend, but he doesn't believe very much of it. But there's something about the effigy, how it inspires people to kill where he feels there's something to it. It gives him a fresh perspective. And of course, he doesn't believe the story about the brain slugs. Even if he did, his first thought wouldn't have been that Gehenna was an emissary. But Deputy Shane, the original Gehenna killer, is an emissary. Based on we don't know anything about this guy. He hasn't been on the show before. Based on the time frame and the fact that he's an active emissary, it's not outside the realm of possibility that he is familiar or a running mate of Nick Braithwaite. He's probably encountered Ira Dunwich before, who coordinated a lot of emissaries throughout the United States. But this is supposition on my part. I don't know. We haven't dove that deep yet. In any event, this emissary, this brain slug, is inside somebody with a history of anti-Semitism and racism. As Schechter said, he did a lot of digging, and this police department had roots in the KKK, like a lot of smaller towns or even larger towns. There are a lot of bad apples in the police department. In this police department, it seems that they were mostly bad apples, which is why Schechter made certain decisions. Based on his fresh perspective, he catches this serial killer that he doesn't know is an emissary and decides to kill him. And then he buries him. And then that's it, right? And it is. This body stays buried, and brain slugs don't tend to come out and run around in the wild. It's inside a dead body. There's no new host, especially if it's buried. It's probably not going to just crawl out and run around. That's not how they operate, for reasons that will be made clear later. But it's just a self-protection thing. It's better to be safe inside something, right? Well, then, some years later, this new ordinance from the local government has all the homeless people run out of town based on a personal thing here in Gainesville. There's been a huge homeless problem for years, dating way back before Danny Rawling, the Gainesville Ripper, who was a Gainesville homeless person. So there are a lot of people that are very sensitive about this subject. And there is a tent city outside of town where homeless are regularly run out of town because there are a lot of them, and they go to this tent city. So that's where this little detail came from. In any event, this nice Gentile boy and his girlfriend Miriam come to this tent city, and they park their tent right over the body of the dead deputy, the dead emissary. The brain slug's been inside the whole time. But now, for several days now, there are live humans just 3 feet away. It's not that the brain slug wasn't capable of digging itself out before. It can wriggle through the earth. There was just no place to go. Now there was. Miriam Pasternak was asleep, her boyfriend, who wasn't given a name. Talia Cohen's Gentile partner wasn't given a name. Just only Jews have names in this episode. Except for Deputy Shane, of course. So now there's a host nearby. The brain slug gets into her as she sleeps. We have seen before that there is a really strong connection between parasite and host. The brain slugs do not jump into your central nervous system and start operating you like a puppet. They work on your higher brain. They get inside you. They work with your personality. You become a team. Sort of. It varies from host to host. But there's also some carryover. Sadie didn't smoke before she got the brain slug. She didn't like rats or have certain memories before. It brings things, it leaves things. So this particular emissary, coming from an anti-Semite that killed Jews, happens to get inside a Jewish person. They continue the work, but when Miriam talks to Itzhak briefly, she recites the blessing from the third night of Hanukkah. She rambles on, but it seems to be more like saving Jews instead of trying to wipe out Jews, because this brain slug has carried that over, but it doesn't work with this host. It needs to adapt the pathology in order to continue the work. So so this is everything that's happening with the brain slug. And then once the time comes, Itzhak realizes that all these stories he's heard from his Roman Catholic friend about brain slugs and emissaries and everything, that they're all real. Unfortunately, he doesn't realize it until it's too late. The eye thing was gross, and I feel bad for making Itzhak do that as the writer, but it was imperative that he saw the slug with his own eyes. It didn't work any other way. He had to see it. He doesn't have an x-ray machine. It had to be physical. Also, eye hanging down, pulsing slug inside the socket. Pretty fucking metal. Okay, this has actually gone on a lot longer than I thought it would. So then we come to the ending, and an emissary is just a person, so Talia shoots her and kills her, and then shoots her in the head, liquefying the rest of her brain. As we all know, a bullet isn't going to kill a brain slug. It's still in there. Our hero, Itzhak, has stayed true and faithful and walked his path this entire way. He didn't blink in the face of evil. He, in her last moments when he thought he was about to die, he was still trying to convince her to walk the right path. So that brain slug is still in there. And he's going to sit Shiva. Now, I thought that was the perfect ending. There was no better way to end that, because whatever happens next is a whole new story, right? But it gives a new perspective to why somebody would sit Shiva. What if there was an evil inside that needed to reveal itself? If you were paying attention, you noticed that there are glass jars in this storage facility. She was putting fuel in them, but there are other ones there. So we got the glass jar on hand. And the rabbi, he was praying at the end. He didn't know what was going to happen next, but he had to just wait and see. And he's going to have to wait, because I'm still sussing it out. But there are two possible ways this could develop. Based on previous episodes, in the storyline, the story is happening in 1994. Lester King is out there hunting down lost brain slugs. He could get one of his flashes, one of his messages, and come looking during Shiva. Maybe. I'm not saying that's going to happen. Something else that may happen is Itzhak would reach out to his Roman Catholic friend for help. Now, based on the timeline, He said he spoke to his Roman Catholic friend, who was definitely a part of the order, around 1987. In 1987, Nemesis was kicking off the campaign to wipe out ghastly cults. Chances are that Rourke wasn't available to just give advice to a friend. But there are many, many other members of the order that weren't in Nemesis. So in 1984, the campaign is long over. Nemesis is no longer around. Rourke has been reassigned to more ambassador type duties. So, if Rabbi Yitzhak made a call to his friend saying that he had a brain slug in captivity, it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility for Francis Rourke to show up and collect it. And just spitballing here, this isn't locked down. But what if Frank Rourke collected that brain slug? He took it back to the fortress, to the vault. He locked it away with all the other brain slugs where it stayed safe. For what, a decade? Longer? Much longer. I have to look at the timeline. I didn't look up the date of the ghastly heist. But during the ghastly heist, a shit ton of brain slugs were stolen from that vault and removed from the fortress. And I was just thinking, what if the Gehenna brain slug was one of the ones that got out? Somehow it finds its way back into a person. The first thing that it would do is to try and find Rabbi Yitzhak to start the next Hanukkah. This would be years and years and years and years later. Rabbi would be in his 60s. That could happen. All right. I hope you enjoyed my drunken ramblings about Hanukkah horror. I love you guys, and I very much appreciate your support of the show. Good night.